Chapter 11. Going Home. Ding! The elevator door opened, and another dozen or so zombies turned their heads to him. With a bit more confidence this time, he threw the meat to the face of the nearest zombie. The zombies rushed towards the fresh, bloody meat, and he took advantage to run towards his car. He took most of the meat he had in stock, throwing them at opportune times until he reached his precious baby. His car was actually a bulky, awesome, manly SUV model monster 931. Most people would think he'd own sexy sports cars like the Leopard. In reality, he was a bit of a macho and he liked larger cars, unlike his pretty boy image. By the time the meat was gone, he was already inside the car. "Hugh," he gasped, resting on the very comfortable upholstered chair of his car with its ergonomic design and breathable fabric made of special synthetic materials. He looked at the unchanged interior of his baby with a smile. "Forever reliable, yes you are," he said, wiping the headboard, the back seats, and the wheels. And finally, after taking a short breather, he turned on the engine. He reversed the car and stepped on the gas. Thump. +5 copper, +5 experience. Oh. It quickly dawned on him about what he just hit, and his eyes brightened. After that, he headed to his target location, running over zombies and gained experience and copper by the way. +5 copper, +5 experience. 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 While he couldn't take the lives of all zombies he ran over, he still made a decent amount of experience overall. The road had been much smoother ever since. "Ah, my baby is the best Tilda," he smiled, driving through the zombies, while avoiding major obstacles to the best of his ability. This car, hereby referred to as Barbara, was a top-of-the-line monster he bought with most of his dividends from the company. Not only did it run fast and smooth, it had a strong bodice and quiet engine. It also had superior high-ground clearance, off-road capabilities, and a powerful engine that allowed it to just run over zombie corpses without the carcasses affecting its run. It was like he bought this car for the apocalypse. Well, almost. Scratches were still inevitable, unfortunately. This wasn't a monster truck that could crush other cars after all. When the car's metallic armor screeched as it scrapped other cars, Ansel teared up a bit. "I'm so sorry, Barbara, but we have to trudge through this." It was painful, almost like he was being scratched himself, but he had no choice but to press on the gas, even when he knew his Barbara would get dented. Ah, the torture. Anyway, except when there were road blockages that he had to crash towards, he was basically unimpeded and unaffected by the chasing zombies for a good hour, gaining some experience as he went, until he finally neared the border of the city. He looked at the back mirror and saw that there were still scores of zombies running after him. He took out the bell counter he stole from the hotel reception and threw it out of the car. The small sound was enough to distract the remaining zombies for a few seconds. It was enough for him to maneuver and escape. Well, sort of. After all, there were still plenty of zombies in the suburbs. Fortunately, it was much calmer, and even with the new zombies running after him, he felt very calm. He found zombies a little cute now. But then he remembered the dents and scratches on Barbara, and his hits became personal again. +5 copper, +5 experience. +5 copper, +5 experience. Sure enough, only huge cars were real cars. Anyway, he continued to happily run over zombies. After running past the suburbs, he arrived at a relatively abandoned highway. Even if there were zombies, they were few and sparse. Even if they got to him, they would be run over by the car. After driving for a bit, he found a place to park his car for a bit of rest. As he sat, he looked at his stats. Stats. Name, Anselwood. Age, 23. Level, 1, 165 1000. Life, 165 200. Spirit, 45,200. Physical, 42. Agility, 35. Attack, 21. Defense, 17. Mana, 100. Physical potential, S. Mental potential, A+. Skills. Active, none. Passive, none. Elemental affinity, fire. Titles, none. Overall rank, A. Current status, weakened. Equipment list. Head, none. Ears, none. Body, wool suit, cotton polo +0 defense. Arms, none. Legs, wool pants +0 defense. Hands, gun plus attack indeterminate. Feet, leather shoes +1 defense, +0 agility. Wealth, 43 gold, 0 silver, 410 copper. He wondered what would happen if his spirit turned 0. Would his soul fly out of his body? Well, he decided not to know by experience. So he closed his eyes and took a well-deserved rest, even if just for a while. 19:44:53. He was woken up by the sound of gunshots not far from him. At first, he was annoyed, but soon his eyes showed a tinge of interest. After all, such noisy guns were really old school, discontinued all the way to before he was born. Did someone use antiques to defend himself? Then again, old guns were better than no guns, so this dude was definitely better off than others. Curiously, he looked over at their direction and eventually found the action. He also saw a huge, middle-aged man apparently losing bullets and was now using it as a hammer instead. Although he was not naive enough to save a person because of kindness, he was someone who was kidnapped once. This dude had been the only survivor he'd seen after so long. Not to mention such a brave, real man like this one. He decided to help out by pressing the horn to distract the zombies, attracting about half of the zombies to him. Then he proceeded to drive away. Sadly, a few minutes later, there was a huge blockage in front of him. It was a deciduous tree felled by a truck. Just as he stared at the obstruction and pondered on what to do, Ansel heard a breathless shout behind him. "I'll help you if you help me." His eyebrows rose as he looked at the rearview mirror. It was that gunhammer guy from before. "Please!" he yelled as he swung his hoe, where did that come from, to the head of the zombie. Knowing there was little choice, Ansel just sighed and made a backing, crushing a lot of the zombies, earning him a bit of experience again. At this rate, it wouldn't be long until he reached level 2. The man didn't wait for the surviving zombies to stand up. He quickly killed them and jumped in the car. "Please make a backing. There's an alley on the right. I've been there and the road is clear." Ansel nodded and followed instructions. Now that he noticed, the man had a mellow voice and he was also very soft-spoken, totally incongruent with his muscular body. After a while, they did find a clear road. He accelerated past the zombies, running over a few again, before they reached the highway with relatively few cars and zombies. Several minutes of silence passed before either of them spoke up. "Thank you," the older man said, taking out a few bolts of silver. "This is half of my earnings so far. Please take it." Ansel was not polite and took the few bits of silver. Of course, his willingness to pay definitely added favorability to his direction. Received, +12 silver. The man didn't speak for a while and just gathered his breath. Some moments of silence passed by them, and Ansel just drove as if he were alone. "My name is Tom. I live a few blocks from here," the man finally spoke after a while. "Ansel," he just answered. "Where do you get off?" he asked, just a bit curious. The man paused and thought. "Where are you heading?" "Z City." The answer seemed to have excited the man. "Can I go with you? My brother's family is in Moxai Town." Moxai was a town under the jurisdiction of Z City. "I will pay you with all the copper I have. I have 100 so far." Ansel did not agree immediately. Instead, he looked back at the man's performance from before. "You're already level 1 as well." "Yes." He nodded. "Okay, but I won't protect you, and you better not hold me back." Of course, of course." Ansel smirked and focused on driving again, dark green eyes fixed on the relatively clear roads ahead. Ignoring the sparse zombie population, it was as if he could see the person he wanted to see at the end of the road. "Wait for me, Althea," he mused. "I'll find you definitely." Chapter 12. Upgraded Zombies. In the 9th house, she couldn't help but look a bit more carefully at the surroundings. Like her own home, it had relatively old designs, telling her the original owners were like her nominal grandparents, obtaining the property very early on. It had a classic design, simple patterns with warm color tones, and very homely. When there was no one who answered her knock, she entered the house with her now practiced unlocking skills, which was easier because she was familiar with the lock designs. She passed the foyer and the anteroom, weapon out and ready to strike. In this house lived a family of 5, the 2 parents, a pair of twin children, and a surviving grandfather. She could find this out from the various photos displayed on the walls. The largest one was a large picture frame over 1 meter in height, except there was also a grandmother in the photo. But it could be seen that in the more recent photos, as seen by the growth of the children, the grandmother had already passed away. They looked like a really happy family, and somehow Althea hoped that she would find survivors here more than others. She decided to start with the upper floors going down, going from room to find valuables. There wasn't much, though, even in the main bedroom, and it was obvious that the family lived a relatively simple life despite their being well off. It was a little endearing. Too bad their house was several blocks away, and they didn't have any interactions before this tragedy. Shaking the thoughts off, Althea passed a few more rooms and eventually ended up in one of the last rooms on that floor. She frowned when she noticed that there were traces of blood in the area. It was like someone bloodied was dragged hurriedly across the floor and heading towards the final room. She didn't follow this trace for now and focused on the door at hand. Tentatively raising her hand, she knocked on it a bit, a little hopeful at the sound. But when she heard it was the familiar scratching and growls, she immediately raised her weapon and opened the door. Roar! Her body moved by instinct to hit the most vulnerable part she could access at this angle, the neck. She took it down with one hit and saw that it was the zombie father who greeted her. Inside, she met the mom and the grandfather and quickly handled them as well. She looked around and saw it was a study. The 3 adults were probably having a meeting of sorts when it happened. There were still teas and teacups on the floor, the carpet drenched with it. There was a plethora of awards on the wall, from the father to the grandchildren, as well as a small bookshelf, very old-fashioned, as most people read e-books now. If she had more space, she would have wanted to bring these treasures with her. Sigh. Shaking her head in regret, Althea looked more carefully around the study. She pondered whether there were hidden compartments and safety deposit boxes, but to no avail. Eventually, she gave up and resumed her trip to the rest of the house. This time, she decided to follow the blood, and her feet stopped at a sound. Her eyes brightened a bit, and she felt a little hopeful. She raised her delicate hands and gently knocked on the door. Knock, 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 knock. She also heard a rustle inside, as if responding to her noise. It wasn't like the slow, scratching sounds made by the zombies. It was more like people dropping things because they were startled. It couldn't have been made by a zombie, she thought. Since the 3 adults were gone, then it must have been the children. The children survived. Unconsciously, her pace hastened a little and she hurried to open the door. 2 swift figures immediately lunged at her, with speeds comparable to the mutt she encountered earlier. This was worse because there were 2 of them, and they were bigger. It was the girl-boy twin of the couple. They were about 13 years old, but the savagery in their eyes and form could scare the soul out of anyone. She followed her body's instinct to hit wherever she felt like there would be an attack. Simultaneous attacks from 2 sides rendered her unable to follow the movement with her mind, so she just let her body's instinct do the work. How many times she almost got scratched, she could no longer count. She had no choice but to leave the house and jump through the railing of the 2nd floor. Luckily, she was flexible, and while enough so, she managed to use the patterned wall as a landing to cushion her fall. But the movement was too wild for a pregnant woman like her, regardless of her strengthened physique. She felt bile rise up her stomach, and she could not stop it. It was at this moment that the zombies rushed to her, and she accidentally threw up on one of them. The other twin smelled the vomit on his sister and attacked her instead. Well, that's one way of putting waste into use, she mused, quite proud, but not before sprinting as far as she could. Soon the twins realized that the fresh meat was gone and ran after her. She quickly used another elevation change to make them lose their balance. One of the twin teenagers followed and jumped carelessly, falling down on her face. Althea immediately raised her club to repeatedly crush the zombie's head. The force bent the golf club, and she threw it away and pulled out another club, continuing the hitting until the body stopped twitching. Plus Fuffton Copper, plus 15 experience. She blocked the teeth of the other twin that ran over, kicking it with all her strength and putting her whole weight to the hit. Plus Fuffton Copper, plus 15 experience. She looked around for any more signs of danger. Her heart felt like it rose up to her brain, her erratic heartbeat echoing inside her head. Her feet gave way as soon as she was sure it was safe, sliding down against the wall and eventually ending up on the floor. It was only now that she realized the amount of red blood in both of the children. Zombies did not bleed, just excreted disgusting fluid and pus. This meant that the children didn't turn to monsters the first time. Rather, they turned into zombies by being bitten by their family members. It was a heartbreaking image to imagine. Was that why they were so strong? This meant that those who had survived the initial transformation would turn to much stronger zombies. And when she thought things couldn't get any worse, it would. For a long time after that, her body shivered from all the adrenaline it had to release. Shakily, her body bent down to hug herself and her belly. And she broke into a sob. Chapter 13, New Weapon. Althea didn't dwell too much after letting out the sobs. But she couldn't help but look at the dead zombie twins, and her heart constricted again, imagining what they'd have gone through. How scared the children must have been to see the adults turn into monsters. How heartbroken they probably were to be attacked by the adults they trusted, filled with intent to kill. And how hopeless they must have felt when they turned to monsters themselves. She couldn't help but sob again. It took her a good 5 minutes before she gathered herself, blaming the darned hormones for her outbursts. When she stood up, though, her emerald eyes couldn't help but look at the kids. It felt uncomfortable just leaving their corpses lying there. So after a moment of thought, she decided to cremate them. Just as she was looking for some gasoline in the house, she noticed that one of the wall displays had dropped from the scuffle. From the marks, it should have been just out of her eye level. From the mess on the floor, her sights fixated on an intricate metallic scabbard just lying there. She walked to it and pulled out the handle, and a sharp, thin blade revealed itself, making her eyes shine. Good weapon. She almost missed this. Excited, she took it for a few swings, cutting the wood furniture like tofu. However, just as she was getting carried away, she felt a sharp discomfort in her lower back. She sniffed. Pregnancy is so inconvenient. She forgot that she was pregnant, and that her spirit was too close to the 50% mark. Gathering herself, she resumed her quest to find gasoline, which she really did find in such a traditional household. She poured gasoline inside the house and burned it, hopping to give the family a cremation, letting them join the soil sooner than wait to rot like all the others. As she stood tens of meters away, her eyes reflecting the large blaze, she started to analyze what she had encountered so far. At least 95% of the population had turned into zombies from the initial transformation, while most animals died from the get-go. As for the few that survived, they turned to zombies that retained their physical advantages while they were still alive. As for the remaining 5%, at most, of the human population, they seemed to have survived. It was just that if they transformed into zombies midway, they would end up becoming upgraded versions of these monsters. These monsters were at least thrice as strong and thrice as quick as the normal zombies. Their sense of smell was also stronger, so her little technique of covering her scent with zombie goo wouldn't work. She realized that the smoothness of her journey until now made her feel complacent again, and realized she had a tendency to do so. She heaved a sigh, thinking it was time to rest and regroup. She took a peek at her stats, studying it. Stats. Name, Althea Witt. Age, 25. Level, 1, 655 1000. Life, 200. Spirit, 102 minus 5%. Physical, 30 minus 5%. Agility, 27 minus 20%. Attack, 11 plus 1. Defense, 16 plus 2. Mana, 100. Physical potential, B. Mental potential. Skills. Active, none. Passive, none. Elemental affinity, wood, water, earth. Titles, none. Overall rank, S. Current status, gestating, 2 life forms, weakened state. As she headed back home, she didn't dare to jump above fences anymore. She went out the gates and used the normal route and naturally encountered more zombies. With her now skillful swinging of her katana, she quickly killed those in the way. Fortunately, there were no upgraded zombies. It was just that the quantity still took a small toll on her spirit. The decrease was small, a mere 2 points, but it triggered a chain reaction. Like thunder, a lot of pregnancy symptoms attacked her simultaneously. Her back suddenly burst in pain, her legs weakened, and her stomach begging to puke. Imbalanced, she could only lean on the wall to support herself, hoping no upgraded zombies would find her. She looked at her stats and saw her spirit at 99, less than half. So many symptoms of pregnancy appeared only now after so long. She reckoned it had to do with the spirit being less than half. Dragging herself back home, house after house, she finally arrived within her walls and went directly to the bathroom to vomit. She gasped and ended up on the cold tile floor. It took her several minutes before she could catch her breath. Spirit, she needed more spirit. However, instead of just sleeping it off, she decided to take a shower. She was no clean freak, but she couldn't handle all the grime and blood from those twin children on her any longer. She checked on the water in the shower to see if it was heated. When it entered the right temperature, she stepped in the shower and finally heaved out a refreshing breath. Not only this, but she also opened the tub so she could soak a little in one of her herbal medicine solutions. It was fortunate that civilization has long graduated from its dependence on fossil fuels. Otherwise, she'd have no electricity, maybe even water, within a day of this calamity. She couldn't imagine being covered with zombie goo the whole day. After doing a basic rinse in the shower, she took the bucket to gather water to place in the space. Water was too important, the most important resource for survival, and she set a quarter of her space for water. She sat down in her bathtub, letting out a moan of relief as she felt the soothing water cover her body. She rested for a while before standing up, drying her hair and body before dropping on her comfortable bed. After waking up, she finally had the energy to study her current situation. Wealth: 153 gold coins, 1822 silver coins, 4330 copper coins. She was very curious about what she could buy with this, and frankly, she had a little overcompulsive urge to convert everything to gold. However, while she had the option of converting 100 copper to 1 silver and 100 silver to 1 gold, it was for a price of 1% for each conversion, so she just left it as was. She took out a notebook and listed down what else she needed to gather. From the houses, she actually got some items as well, like that 100,000 worth pair of hiking backpacks, for one. Speaking of which, she was curious. The system said that items inside the space would be taken upon immigration. She wondered if other attached items could also be taken. After all, they wouldn't get there naked without clothes, right? Probably. Maybe. Still, she dutifully added a few more changes of clothing for all seasons in her space, just in case. Chapter 14, Level 2. 16:34:23. Althea woke up from her alarm after sleeping for a few hours, eyes meeting the weak light of dawn. After cleaning herself up and eating breakfast, she decided to take an inventory of her space. A lot had been added as she ventured around her neighborhood. For organization purposes, she divided the space into 6 areas. She arranged for a part purely for drinkable water. Another 2 parts were filled with bags of rice and flour, as well as several cubic centimeters of canned and dried foods, fruits, and meats. She also made sure she had complete sets of seasonings, a lot of them. She was not a good cook, but she, allegedly, could do some basic meals. Seasoning was essential for her to make a palatable meal. However, as someone who mixed herbs for a living, she was not without talent. It was just that there had always been someone better at her at this, so she let them cook instead. Now that she didn't have a choice, she made sure recipes were downloaded to her external drive for the sake of her sanity. In retrospect, she had never ever cooked for her husband before. It had always been the other way around. She swore that when they found each other after this, she would cook him a meal not inferior to what he fed her. She didn't bother put perishable food, though. After seeing some of the cooked food lose freshness, she confirmed that the time in the backpack space was not static, hence she did not bother wasting space for easily perishable food. She went to her laboratory and took her handy custom-made lab equipment. This was custom-made equipment she had done because she was often outside, often in the mountains, gathering specimens. It was basically a carry-on lab and also very expensive. Half of her earnings last year went to this. How could she be willing to waste it? She even named it Torai, because she really loved it quite a bit. She also took her portable external memory, which was only as big as a toenail, as well as her state-of-the-art tablet. It contained terabytes of knowledge automatically downloaded by her AI assistant. Because of her field in science, she had always had the habit of downloading a lot of information that may or may not be useful. She didn't think she knew everything, and she had only skimmed through a small part of this knowledge so far. Not to mention, she often needed to read references, especially in places without signal when she had to explore and camp. Most importantly, these external drives also contained soft copies of thousands of photos taken through the years. They were all of her family, friends, and her husband. There were also a few printed pictures in her space. She also had a small box containing the seeds of the herbs she had, and she also took the herbs in her greenhouse and handled them. Of course, how could she forget her portable solar panel chargers? Overall, the entire tech collection occupied 2 parts of the floor space. She placed the clothing, living essentials, and the baby products on top to save space. There were also camping items like flashlights, lighters, tents, and bags. With this, she still had over 1/6 of the space left. For now, she filled up the remaining space with food and snacks that she could eat on the way. She also took in some raw meat she could maybe use as a decoy. Although zombies' sense of smell was normal, she thought that maybe they'd be a bit more sensitive to raw meat. Ideally, other than some space left for emergencies, the rest should be filled up with legitimate weapons. Weapons. If she was to get to even the nearest baby products store, she really couldn't handle so many zombies by herself. Not to mention, there were definitely upgraded zombies, and maybe zombie creatures roaming around there. She must have a good weapon before taking a risk. Not just any weapon, but hot weapons. She searched her memory, and after a while, finally remembered a rumor amusedly told to her by Nanny. They seemed to have a drug lord for a neighbor. It was just a rumor, yes, but it was worth a try. Who knows, maybe she'd have some unexpected finds. The drug lord's house was right at the end of the villa area, so she decided to also pass by the villas she hadn't been to by the way. There were about 12 houses between the two. The first 2 houses were relatively smooth, earning another bunch of gold and silver coins. Actually, for the most part, there were thousands of silver coins and only a handful of gold. But there was a very interesting house among them. In one of the houses, there was a sculpture made of gold. It didn't fit the backpack space, so she had thought she may not be able to cash it in. However, she just needed to touch it and will it to cash it in. Received, plus 32 gold. Smooth. She did notice her spirit lost 5 points, however, so she definitely had to watch her consumption even closer. However, what she didn't know was that if level 0 survivors tried this, it wouldn't have worked. It could be said that Althea was still a little lucky with her timing. She jumped over the fence of the third house, okay, using the ladder, but she wasn't even able to take a few steps inside. She immediately backed away by instinct, narrowly avoiding the sharp bite of a dog. Then by instinct, she ran in another direction and rolled over, avoiding another one. 2. Although it seemed like a Doberman, its fur had a different texture, definitely a mixed breed. The other one was definitely a mutt, not owned by the villa owner. Even as she was escaping from their sharp teeth, she couldn't help but think of how dogs with mixed genes were so much stronger than inbred dogs. Speaking of which, what about the animals outside? How many mutts, stray cats, and others would be out there? She shuddered at the thought of zombie rats. Of course, this was with the assumption that they survived the initial transformational forces, which wasn't very likely seeing that most house pets didn't survive. Roar. She flinched and forced herself to concentrate on the fight, holding her katana tightly. The 2 dogs charged, and she hit one dog while kicking the other one. A second later, it was the other mutt that was hit. This went on for a long time, and she could feel her spirit reducing at a palpable rate. When she finally immobilized one zombie mutt, her pregnancy symptoms had begun acting up again. This can't go on. She looked around if there was anything else she could use. Ignoring the body pains, she ran to the shed. Waiting for the dog to enter, she quickly ran out and closed the door. She ran back to the immobilized mutt to finish him off, turning around to hit the other dog. Plus 10 copper, plus 10 experience. Plus 10 copper, plus 10 experience. Congratulations on entering level 2. She heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that another 100 points of spirit were added when she leveled up. In turn, the horrible pregnancy symptoms subsided a little so that she could finally walk properly. Like before, there were no material rewards for leveling up, but her health boosted up again, and she felt like she could jump from roof to roof now even with her 2 bobbies. She could also see clearly dozens of meters away and could hear noises from afar. Unfortunately, her sense of smell also sharpened, and she immediately felt a little dizzy. Couldn't she choose which sense to sharpen? Chapter 15, Survivors. 13, 34, 33. Stats. Name, Althea Witt. Age, 25. Level, 2, 253,000. Life, 250,300. Spirit, 230,300, minus 5%. Physical, 50 minus 5%. Agility, 47 minus 20%. Defense, 40. Mana, 200. Physical potential, B. Mental potential. Skills. Active, none. Passive, none. Elemental affinity, wood, water, earth. Titles, none. Overall rank, S. Current status, gestating, 2 life forms, weakened state. Wealth, 164 gold coins, 2122 silver coins, 4330 copper coins. Now that her health had recovered, she decided to hit the other houses all the way to the so-called drug lord. She was amazed by how clearly she could now see the details of the other houses. If she made a noise, she could basically hear even the slightest of the reactive noises nearby, as long as they were outside the house. She thought that with a few more levels, she should be able to hear inside houses with insulation. The next house averaged about 7 zombies each, and fortunately, there were no animals or upgraded zombies. Unfortunately, the loot was also average. The katana was also still the best weapon so far. There were actually fencing swords, but she thought it was flimsy and may not handle the skull of an upgraded zombie. She was still worrying about her future weapon when she arrived at the next house, just before the alleged drug lords. In this house, she noticed something a bit different. In the other houses, any noise she made attracted zombies not just outside the fence, but also inside it. For instance, she should be attracting zombies just by opening the gate. But the gate was already wide open, and even when she made a bit of noise, the yard was still quiet. At first, she just thought the zombies were all inside the house. She habitually knocked on the door, asking if there was someone there. She was actually a bit non-committal because she had been to so many houses and no one answered with anything other than a growl. "Who?" An awkward croak from a male. She flinched. Surprisingly, there really was someone. She cleared her throat, a little excited. "Hi, this is Althea Witt from 2 Holmes Street." She paused, pondering. "I'm walking around houses to see if there are survivors." There was silence on the other end for a while. Althea sighed and gestured to go when she heard a sound from the door. A small square on the eye-level surface of the door slid to reveal transparent glass. This was actually a common design in front doors back in the day. This was in contrast to that of her house, which had a small peeping hole that small people could barely reach. From the small opening, she could see an old face filled with wrinkles, his eyes full of vicissitudes, and was looking at her warily. Althea good-naturedly kept her smile and patiently stood in place, not making any sudden movements. The old man stared at her, as if figuring out her purpose, and he soon realized she was a pregnant woman, and he seemed to relax, but only a little bit. "What do you want?" he asked, voice small and weak. "We can share a bit of food, but not too much, and only once." After all, they didn't know how long this tragedy would last. "Oh, no, I don't need food. It's just that I've been to several houses, and you were the first survivor I've seen." The man's eyes widened, a hint of disbelief in his expression. "How many houses?" "Almost all the other houses in the subdivision." After a beat, the old man finally spoke. "How did you deal with those monsters?" He then looked closely at her whole body to realize it was full of black blood. Seeing his dawn of understanding, she nodded. "Well, normal zombies tend to ignore me like this. However, it is useless to zombie animals and upgraded zombies." The door finally opened and the man invited her in. Please tell me more." Althea nodded and entered. She walked gracefully, and one would admire her temperament had she not been covered in zombie innards. The old man led her to the interior of the house, which was filled with rustic color tones and comfortable furniture. As she looked around, her lively eyes landed on a little girl half hiding behind a partition. Only her head was visible, guarded but curious, and ready to hide the moment their eyes met. She looked about 6 or 7 years old, very cute. Althea looked very happy to finally see a survivor, especially a child. She then turned to the old man, who politely asked her to sit down. She did do so, but her sights couldn't help but return to the little girl who was revealing her head again, checking her out. Althea laughed, in a very good mood. Because these two, no matter what, they represented something to her. They represented the hope that she was really not alone in this new, horrible world. Chapter 16, Harold and Maya. The old man raised his hand to call the little girl. Slowly, the little girl emerged from her hiding place, her curious eyes not leaving the beautiful stranger that entered their house. "This is Maya," the old man said with a small smile. "My daughter. My name is Harold, by the way." Althea was a bit surprised at the fact that Maya was his daughter. She thought she would be his granddaughter. The man, seemingly aware of her stare, was apparently used to this reaction. He gave her a kind smile in response. "My wife gave birth very late. Maya is a miracle." They had been trying to have a child for 20 or so years after their marriage. He was already in his 50s and his wife in her late 40s when they found out that they had finally gotten pregnant. His wife also died of dystocia because of this. No matter how advanced science was, it could not always cheat death. My condolences. Thank you, the old man said, but to be honest, I'm just happy we both survived. She nodded. What were the chances, right? She hadn't found survivors after so long, but suddenly there were two. Althea smiled. Well, we are blessed, she said before pausing, looking at the two of them in observance. What do you know about what's happening? Harold did not speak immediately, composing his words for fear of sounding too ridiculous. Well, we know those monsters appeared a few hours ago outside the gate. They wanted to reach out to me, but I just hid here. Althea was a bit surprised. Only you two are in the house. Otherwise, they wouldn't have so little experience with zombies. The man nodded. I am the housekeeper here, and my master allowed my daughter to stay with me as a work benefit. My master generally lives abroad with his family. This is just an inheritance from his parents, so he didn't want to sell it. Althea thought for a while before speaking. Well, I suggest you kill a few. Take a long tool and poke their heads through the gates. She paused and looked at the little girl. She should do it too. What? The man looked at her in disbelief, suddenly regretting letting her in. Did he bring in a psycho? Althea knew no amount of words could make them understand the weirdness that had been happening in the world. Instead, she took out 2 of the 3 remaining golf clubs from the backpack space. 2 things appearing out of thin air was definitely a shocking sight. Harold gasped and Maya even yelled. The little girl suddenly stood up to look at the clubs closely, losing her shyness. Magic, so cool. Althea smiled, handing the putter to the girl and the wood to Harold. It's a system backpack. You can have it too if you kill those monsters. Harold looked at her warily, but also with curiosity. After some internal monologue, he decided to listen to her more in the end. Can you tell us why? He asked. Why all these things? Why are these things happening to us? You should have heard the news that the sun is dying, right? She asked, and Harold nodded after a thought. My theory is that the monsters outside had to do with some weird force field that the sun released, mutating the genes of living things. Of course, this is only my own supposition. She couldn't help but add. A force called universe system, or something, will apparently send us somewhere else before the planet becomes completely uninhabitable, which is less than 24 hours. She let this idea sit for a while. She knew it sounded ridiculous. But wasn't everything that had been happening the past few hours no less insane? It's just that this system should only get triggered when you kill one of those monsters. She continued, calmly explaining. If you activate it, you will also level up and improve your physique. The more you kill, the stronger you will be. You will also get money. I'm assuming the currency in the system is the currency of the new world. As for how she knew, she didn't. Not for certain, but it was the only hypothesis she had that made sense. Anyway, regardless of whether or not they activated the system, they would have to fight those things sooner rather than later. She stood up and patted the non-existent dust on her pants. Well, it's time for me to go now. Very good to meet you. The other 2 were taken aback. She was obviously sitting comfortably just now. Where are you going? Exploring, preparing myself for what's to come, she only said, not explaining anymore. They wouldn't be able to imagine it anyway. For now, I suggest you deal with those monsters outside the gate. As she walked to the door, she turned her head to look at the dumbfounded pair. Be careful. Why you too? Harold uttered as he finally realized she was really leaving. It was Maya who stood up and went closer. Bye-bye, pretty sister, she said, and Althea unconsciously smiled. Looking at the girl's cute, large, circular eyes, Althea couldn't help but give a few more tips. She turned to look at Harold. Try to hit the openings of their bodies like the eyes and the mouth, she told him, her soft palm touching the putter on the girl's hands. Their brains must be destroyed. Better if you can decapitate their heads. Thank you, was all old Harold could say. To be honest, his small brain still hadn't wrapped around everything she said, but his instincts told him to listen nevertheless. He had no idea he'd be thanking this pregnant girl a lot more in the future. Next stop, Drug Lord's lair, was what she wanted to say. There was no way. The pregnancy snooze was a real need. She couldn't speak for other survivors, but she, for one, really needed her rest. Althea had a hunch that it would be troublesome in the last house. Her eyelids were getting heavy, anyway. While the improved body of her level gave her unprecedented strength, she still needed to relax for a bit first. So she climbed up a clean bed of the next villa and took a well-deserved rest. Chapter 17, The Largest House. 10:29:09. At the very last corner of the villa area sat the largest house, which encompassed 3 full lots. The fence was over 2 meters high, and this did not include the electrified mesh wires above it. No wonder people thought the owner was a criminal. Regardless of whether or not it was true, this was a totally suspicious setup, right? Anyway, with her coat of zombie gunk, she sauntered to the gate and habitually pressed the doorbell. She pressed it again and only saw zombies ambling near her due to the noise. She also heard scratches and roars inside the house. She decided to take it as a sign that there weren't any survivors. With the katana in her hand, she skillfully swiped the heads of the zombies. She was surprised by the number of them, though. She was only at the entrance, and she had already dealt with 20 zombies. Was he having a party or something? But all these zombies were wearing boring suits. Regardless of whether these zombies were partying or were minions, Althea vowed to kill all that blocked her path. The more she did it, the more adept she got, and soon the dozen zombies that followed were really no problem at all. After some time, she managed to enter the house and ended up in the grand hall of the house. Here, she was met with shining riches. For example, a meter-tall golden statue, and it sold for much more than what the politician's house contained. Excited, she quickly swept the house and earned plus 120 gold easily from the displays alone. It was amazing. Hyped up, she continued to explore the large house, taking some expensive wine from the cellar. Anyway, it could also be used for wounds. She also met an upgraded zombie, but with experience and her current level, it was no longer a problem. She eventually landed in the study. Obviously, there were plenty of secret documents she couldn't be bothered with. Instead, she looked carefully around the room, using her improved eyesight to get clues on his safety deposit box. How did she know there was something valuable here? Because there were a lot of zombies, including an upgraded one, in the area. Sure enough, she saw an area that seemed a bit cleaner, but also more worn out than other areas on the bookshelf. With a creak, the rows of books were suddenly adjustable and could be pulled out. A bit excited, she pulled the book, and soon the shiniest safety deposit box she had ever seen was revealed. She dutifully took it in her space. Received, plus 323 gold, plus 4432 silver. She basically skipped along the hallway in glee afterward. Then, she realized there were still more zombies. She swung her katana with increasing skill, but she soon noticed that it was getting harder and harder. Her eyebrows furrowed. She was encountering more and more advanced zombies. She looked at the direction they seemed to be coming from and wondered if she should go there. If she did, maybe she would be like those horror movie characters, going to places they should be veering away from instead. Anyway, after dealing with every zombie that approached her, she heaved a sigh and sat down on a pretty upholstery to gather back some of the spirits she lost during the sprint. She allowed herself a quarter of an hour of respite before following the traces of the zombies. But rather than a site for horror movies, zombies not included, she ended up on a dead end at the end of a hallway. It was covered with a massive painting extending from the ceiling soffit to the ground. It was a weird abstract painting of geometric humans and animals, seeming to have a party of sorts. However, thanks to her observation skills and improved eyesight, she soon discovered that there was something unusual about the painting. She looked closer and felt the texture of every surface she could reach, and found a little indentation at the side of the frame. She saw that in the background there was a piece of grape a little shinier than the others. She pressed it, but there was no reaction, and for a moment she thought she might have been too many Illinois James movies. But then she thought, would there be so many advanced zombies on a dead end? She walked back to get a more holistic view of the painting. She took a flashlight from the space to get more lighting, and soon realized that one of the tarot cards, placed just below eye level, had a different material. She stared at it for a bit and realized it looked like a glass of sorts. She wondered if it card scanner or something. Anyway, the curious Althea went back to the entrance of the corridor and looked for the card among the bodies lying down, eventually finding one. She unceremoniously used the card to open the elevator, and with a ping, the painting opened up to reveal a super luxurious elevator with a small chandelier on top. She thought that if the elevator would ever fall, the chandelier would kill whoever was inside first. Shaking her head, she entered the elevator anyway. There was only one button, and she pressed it after scanning the card. As she felt the elevator descend, she held her trusted katana in front, ready for the enemies she would face. The door opened and revealed a massive underground warehouse, about as large as the entire lot and as deep as 2 floors. There were long tables with huge amounts of equipment, cash, and mysterious powder. Good Lord, really a drug lord. At this moment, 3 upgraded zombies wearing uniforms rushed to her. She didn't underestimate these guys and threw raw bloody meat at one of them, dealing with 3 during their moment of distraction. If Ernst was here, he would be very proud and say, "That's my sister all right." However, what Althea focused on were the beautiful, gorgeous, marvelous things hanging on their zombie waists. Guns. She excitedly dealt with the remaining zombies. After making sure there were no more, she made a quick inventory. There were a total of 32 guns. There was even a plasma gun. It was illegal to own weapons in their Eden country, so it was estimated this might be her only chance to get a hold of these bobbies. What was better was that guns nowadays barely made sounds, not to mention this legendary plasma gun, which was a true silent killer. In this situation, this was a treasure equivalent to all the other guns combined. Although technology had greatly improved, normal guns still used consumables like bullets. On the other hand, plasma guns used consumables like energy cores filled with the required ionized gas, which were insanely expensive. After all, the tech was still too young. However, from what she had read about it and knew this should still be enough to protect her, at least a few days in the new world. Excitedly, she tried putting the precious plasma gun in her space. No weapons of mass destruction allowed. A bit fluncha, she tried placing the other weapons in her space. Machine guns, grenades, and similar items were also prohibited. No weapons of mass destruction allowed. 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 A little discouraged, she placed the most basic guns in the backpack and fortunately, they were allowed. However, there was not enough space to take in everything, so she chose some good models that had a lot of bullets in stock. She was fortunate that she forced her husband to take her to the military shooting range for fun date night. And because she did business with the military, this didn't become an issue. So, although normal guns weren't as intuitive as plasma guns, she should still be able to use them, more or less. Walking back up, she couldn't help but take a short rest again when she saw the luxurious sofas in the living rooms. As she lied down, she checked her account again. Wealth, 1482 gold, 23,342 silver, 3341 copper coins. She still had over 9 hours left. Thinking of all the things she lacked, she decided to go downtown. Anyway, she already took away the valuables at home. With her guns, she had this confidence. Maybe she could even squeeze in an ultrasound session to see why her stomach grew so big. Chapter 18. Meeting an old friend. Zara Nun, Zarata 20ta. Althea walked out of the elevator in a happy mood, the plasma gun secured on her back. Then she needed to find herself a good ride. As such, after a little thought, she decided to go to the drug lord's garage and see what she could get. When she got there, though, she realized that the drug lord's garage was a warehouse of cars. When she entered, the lights automatically turned on, revealing a huge array of cars for her to choose from. It ranged from the best local sedans, to the foreign ones, to the SUVs, AUVs, and then there were luxury RVs and even helicopters. There was even a small plane. However, she was going to the city. There would definitely be too many cars blocking the road, and even if there was a monster truck here, she probably wouldn't use it due to all the noise it would make. She walked deeper to look for more suitable choices, and eventually found the two-wheeled vehicles, and her eyes brightened. The Jazzer series, the top of the line of this type of motorcycles. She normally wouldn't know, but who told her brother to gush about it? In the end, she chose a high-performing motorcycle with the least noise rate and the sturdiest specifications. The model was excellent. It was very fast and famous for its strong engine that didn't produce any noise at all. Most importantly, it was comfortable. Even her very pregnant self could sit properly and safely. When she went out the gate, she took a minute to check the status of the father and daughter from before. She could see the father and daughter poking at the gate from her side of the street. Unlike her house, their house has wide gaps in their metallic fence. They can do this technique along the entire perimeter of the property. And from their expressions, they seemed to be enjoying it, like a parent-child pair bonding in an arcade. She shook her head in amusement before picking up the helmet and climbing up the motorcycle, heading to the exit of the villa area. However, as she exited the main gate, she saw a swift figure coming at her. She instinctively maneuvered the bike to the side and raised her plasma gun, aiming at the attacking critter. Just that, it wasn't really attacking. Arf, arf. Dog. What greeted her was a dog, one that fortunately didn't attack her. It was a dog about 1 meter in height. In appearance, it was a combination of various breeds, exhibiting the beautiful gestures of each one. It had amazing smooth fluff, long drooping ears, large eyes, a pointed but rounded nose, and a perennial smiley face. It was also an old friend. "Fluffy," she exclaimed, albeit in a whispering tone in hopes of not attracting zombies. She quickly parked the motorcycle and climbed down, walking closer to the dog. She stared at it closely, and, looking at its stupid look, she knew for sure this wasn't a zombie dog. She leaned down with a bit of a challenge due to her large stomach, and the dog ambled closer in response. Seeing his cute look, she couldn't help but smother his face and patted his head like she always did. "How are you, okay?" Indeed, it not only survived the weird force, but it also didn't turn into a zombie. Her heart felt very happy to see him okay. Fluffy was a beautiful mutt dog she had been feeding for over a year now. He was obviously a mixed breed, but very beautiful, his Labrador blood obviously a little more dominant in the gene pool. She named it Fluffy because he always looked like he was laughing. He was so cute, and she had wanted to take it home the first time she saw it. Unfortunately, Auntie was allergic, so it couldn't be adopted. However, she did feed, pet, and play with it whenever she had the chance, mostly before and after going to work. Speaking of which, this thing was amazing. Loose animals weren't allowed in the villa area, but after so long this dog was still around. However, as she coddled the little cutie, her hands paused. Could she take it with her in that other world? If she couldn't, wouldn't she be setting herself up for heartbreak? Fluffy tilted his head, probably wondering why she stopped petting him. Althea abruptly stood up and clapped her hand to get the attention of the surrounding zombies. She took out her katana and beheaded a few. As for the last one, she cut off its legs and arms, kicking it to land right in front of Fluffy. She watched it groan and growl, but unable to move, no matter how hard it tried. Althea looked at the dog and instructed him seriously. "You kill one too." A few more zombies arrived soon after, cutting off their limbs, and then crushing their heads as an example. Do it. In fact, she wasn't really expecting the dog to actually do it. What could a dog understand? Unexpectedly, Splat. Fluffy really did it. And judging by how the dog actually made a huge dent on the skull, he did it quite beautifully. Good Bayatolda, she goaded and took out a piece of beef jerky. Then after watching the dog eat its treat, she eagerly looked at him. How is it? Do you see weird screens? Nod your head if you do, she said with a smile, nodding her own head. The stupid dog just stared at her. She sighed, covered the dog with zombie goo to his despair, though in fairness to him, he seemed to not be too disgusted with her at the moment, and she carried the dog to the back seat of the motorcycle. Well, at least she had company. It was at this time that a few more zombies appeared. She casually took out a slice of raw meat to distract them, but suddenly Fluffy opened his mouth and gobbled on it instead. Ouch. You. Fluffy seemed to have nicked her finger a bit, and a few drops of blood flowed. Would you like to enter a battle pet contract with Fluffy? Yes, no. Although a bit startled, she pressed yes anyway. When she did, a small flat of light formed underneath them, which also disappeared into shimmering dust a moment later. Then, nothing. She blinked and opened her stats, seeing a new icon on the bottom right with a cartoonized version of this smiling dog. Pet stats. Name, Fluffy. Age, 2. Level, 0-5-100. Life, 15150. Spirit, 15150. Physical, 31. Agility, 26. Defense, 14. Mana, 100. Skills. Active, none. Passive, none. Elemental affinity, Earth. Titles, none. Overall rank. What was this? Also, the experience requirement for pets seemed to be twice as hers. However, the base stats were higher. But she had no time to study this for now. She had to shoot down the approaching zombies first. She missed a few, but the plasma gun was awesome and didn't have recoil or reload time, so she killed them all fairly quickly anyway. Then, when she finally put down the gun, Fluffy's cute paws landed gently on her thigh. She turned her head to meet his eyes. She looked at the forever smiling canine in front of her, as if wanting to express something. Unfortunately, she could not suddenly hear the dog's voice in her head. It was not as if the dog suddenly learned her language like those fantasy novels Ansel liked to read. However, she now had an intuitive understanding of what he was trying to express. She looked at him again, trying to decipher his meaning, and he barked happily in response. Kill, kill, kill. Chapter 19, Downtown. Althea arrived at her destination some time later, and now she was looking at the tall modern building in front of her in relief. The villa area was technically within the scope of the city. On a good day, they could get to the downtown area within 20 minutes, even with a bit of traffic. However, with all the cars and zombies blocking the way, the trip took over an hour. She sighed as she looked at the time. 07:41:02. Tusk, what a waste. Her first stop was, of course, the mall's supermarket. She entered with her handy plasma gun in tow, with a goo-covered Fluffy leisurely following her steps. The moment she entered, zombies were immediately attracted by the sound, and she immediately hit them all with the plasma gun. Anyway, she couldn't take it with her. She might as well maximize its use while she could. +5 experience, +5 copper. +5 experience, +5 copper. +5 experience, +5 copper. +5 experience, +5 copper. After clearing out the floor with the handy plasma gun, she proceeded to do some leisure shopping. Her first stop was baby products. She took several cans of milk, a few sets of bottles, several packs of diapers, pacifiers, several sets of clothes until the age of 3, and others. She also took 2 smaller toys to fit in the small space. But she saw more cute clothes, and was heartbroken not to be able to take more. She pursed her lips in thought, and a sparkle of an idea hit her head almost immediately. She ran to the staff-only area and rummaged a bit. It took her a while, but she did find what she was looking for, a vacuum sealer. With this treasure, she packed up a lot more clothes than she had originally planned. Her bobbies would have Terran clothes, until the age of 5 no problem. She then went to the feminine items next to get some napkins and tampons. Although she didn't have her menses now, she would have it in a few months. She took a lot more of the space-saving tampons. She didn't vacuum them at all, because she heard they wouldn't return to their original forms afterward. Heading back to the food section, she took some raw meat as they lost a few as bait on the way. She took non-perishables like rice, flour, instant noodles, jerkies, and the like. She also took all the seeds on display. Seeds, she should get more. Next was the adults' clothing on another floor. First, she passed by the men's sections taking a few sets of clothing and underwear for both her husband and her brother. She also took some comfortable shoes for both of them. Finally, she moved on to her own garments. She went to the clothing and sports stores to get equipped, choosing the best she could find and taking away what she could vacuum-packed, of course. Equipment. Head, motorcycle helmet plus 3 defense. Ears, none. Body, leather jacket, cotton undergarments plus 2 defense. Synthetic vest plus 3 defense. Arms, arm brace plus 1 defense. Legs, leather pants plus 2 defense. Hands, plasma gun plus attack indeterminate. Leather gloves plus 1 defense. Feet, leather boots plus 2 defense, plus 0 agility. Decisively ignoring the ugly biking helmet she could have taken, she then proceeded to the next floor to get to the mountaineering shop. At this point, not much space was left in the space backpack, so she had to choose much more carefully on what to place. In the end, she went to the mountaineering section to get tools and supplies that she didn't have at home, as well as some outdoor-grade backpacks and duffel bags. She wanted to test if the only things she could bring were only inside the backpack, or if anything she carried could be carried with her. She filled both bags with the basics of everything: a bit of ready-to-eat food, a few bottles of water, and change of clothes for females. In this way, it would be great if she could carry them, but fine if she couldn't. As she moved, she continued to deal with the zombies using the plasma gun. Since she couldn't take it or even the energy core with her, she decided to use it wantonly. Plus 10 experience, plus 10 copper. Plus 5 experience, plus 5 copper. Plus 10 experience, plus 10 copper. Plus 5 experience, plus 5 copper. Fufy was also fighting his heart out, turning out to be quite the sadistic dog. She low-key watched as Fufy got more and more familiar with jumping twice his height and using his cute paw pads to smash zombie heads. It was gruesomely amusing to watch. Anyway, the number of upgraded zombies was understandably many times more than what she had encountered before. After all, the number of people here was naturally several times more than her own villa area. Fortunately, the plasma gun was really easy to use. It was strong and there was barely any rebound at all. With her improved physique, she could barely feel it at all. Of course, she also let Fufy kill a few for training. He soon reached level 1, earning some very good stats. Eventually, she got to the elevator to go to the luxury area. After clearing out the zombies, she swept through the jewelry and watch stores. She took everything she could. Even the store's warehouses didn't escape her claws, either. Wealth: 1992 gold, 32,087 silver, 4452 copper. Looking at her wallet made her happy. How nice. Should she rob a bank? She paused her steps at the thought. Well, should she? Unfortunately, mall branches were unlikely to have gold, so she didn't bother with the banks there. Instead, she set her sights on the largest bank downtown, a few blocks from her current location. Because of the time limit, she really couldn't be inefficient at all. Thinking she should get as much money as she could, she chose the most time-efficient bank to go to. Who knew if other people thought of the same? Wouldn't she feel so much regret? She would later find out that she was actually thinking too much regarding resource rivalry at this time. After all, almost all creatures on the planet were either dead or had turned into zombies. In the dense cities, the survivors of the first wave were now either dead or hiding away. Who else could think of getting out at this time, especially knowing they would be taken somewhere likely safer after 24 hours? Even if they did go out to get supplies, they would most likely just get food and drinks, rather than rob a bank. But Althea didn't know this, so she was bent on being as productive as she could in the shortest amount of time. They continued on their killing spree, and soon more and more zombies found them, especially with the leadership of the upgraded zombies. The disaster happened at the peak of night activities, after all, and each floor had hundreds of zombies. However, with their current level and weapons, as long as they were not swarmed by all of these, they'd be fine. She and Fufi kill a few hundred more, and she could see her experience bar soaring. She had become more and more proficient with the gun. Partnered with improved vision, she could now hit at least 95% of her shots. Plus 10 experience, plus 10 copper. Plus 5 experience, plus 5 copper. Plus 10 experience, plus 10 copper. Plus 10 experience, plus 10 copper. Plus 5 experience, plus 5 copper. Plus 5 experience, plus 5 copper. Heaving a sigh, she went to the furniture store to sit down and rest. As she and Fufi rested, she looked at her stats. Stats. Name, Althea Witt. Age, 25. Level, 2, 2843,000. Life, 25300. Spirit, 13300, minus 5%. Physical, 50 minus 5%. Agility, 47 minus 20%. Defense, 40. Mana, 200. Physical potential, B. Mental potential. Skills. Active, none. Passive, none. Elemental affinity, wood, water, earth. Titles, none. Overall rank, S. Current status, gestating, 2 life forms, weakened state. She smiled. It wouldn't take long before her upgrade. Her hands unconsciously patted her stomach, and they gave her a gentle kick in response. She laughed. She hoped to be as strong as possible before migration. The unknown was the scariest thing. Only with enough strength would she escape the fate of living in fear. At the very least, she would do whatever it took to give her children a stable place to grow up in. Chapter 20, Twin Dorks. Althea watched as the head of the upgraded zombie exploded. Congratulations on entering level 3. Giararara. She looked down and saw Fufi growling defensively around them. Althea was a bit puzzled to see him like this when she saw the remaining zombies within a dozen meters turn their heads at her, looking at her hungrily. She frowned. None of these zombies were upgraded. Why were they suddenly stimulated? Not having the time to think too deeply, she quickly followed Fufi, who was already breaking skulls, and she raised her gun to take them down. Plus 5 experience, plus 5 copper. 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 Seeing the room without any more movements, Althea smiled and patted the dog's head. Fufi habitually placed his head next to her stomach, as if to hug her and the bobbies. Stats. Name, Althea Witt. Age, 25. Level, 3, 105,5000. Life, 400,500. Spirit, 340,500, minus 5%. Physical, 80 minus 5%. Agility, 77 minus 20%. Defense, 64. Mana, 300. Physical potential, B. Mental potential. Skills. Active, none. Passive, none. Elemental affinity, wood, water, earth. Titles, none. Overall rank, S. Current status, gestating, 2 life forms, weakened state. Wealth, 2023 gold, 35,487 silver, 79.52 copper. With a massive smile, she exited the mall and headed towards the central bank. It just so happened that the pharmacy and the herb shop she frequented weren't far from there. She got on her trusted motorcycle, with Fufi jumping on the back on his own. With a whoosh, they headed toward their destination. It was a peaceful few seconds on the way there, ignoring the zombies attracted by the noise they made bumping into an occasional obstacle. Bam! Squelch! She flinched and stopped her motorcycle, cleanly shooting down the zombies still going after her until then. She looked at the direction of the noise. Specifically, it was the noise created by dropping heavy objects, followed by a disgusting sound of squishing innards. She stood in place for a moment when she realized the noise was heading in her direction. It did not take long for her to see the excitement. It was happening about 100 meters away or so, on a perpendicular street. There were 2 survivors. They had slightly different body shapes, but she could see that they were obviously twins. Did twins have higher survival rates? She wondered. Interestingly, they had been using the backspace space as a temporary storage of heavy debris, like heavy chunks of metal, and used it to crush the zombie heads. Heh, how creative. And because of this operation, a lot of the zombie innards and gray matter splattered their clothes, accidentally covering themselves with zombie goo. Although not as much as she had, it was enough to keep them from being swarmed by all the zombies several meters away. She watched them with interest as they took on zombies, heading in a direction. From what she gathered, they were probably heading to the supermarket she just left. She watched as they got closer and closer, until they reached the correct street. Unfortunately, their momentum didn't last long because from the corner of her eyes, she could see an upgraded zombie rushing in. It was quite fast, and it already raised its claws before one of the twins could turn his head. Obviously, the bulkier twin had better reflexes, as he used a broken locker door as a shield to guard against the attack of the upgraded zombies. "It's one of those stronger zombies," he whispered urgently, but Althea's hearing had already sharpened to the point she could hear it clearly. "Brother, go. I'll be fine. Just go." The bulkier of the brothers tried to push the other in the direction of the supermarket. "Mom is waiting for us." Althea frowned. She had been to the supermarket. Although she didn't go to all the places, she somehow didn't feel like there were still survivors there at all. At this point, another upgraded zombie found the twins and was trying its best to take a bite. Althea sighed, already making her decision. She found that she quite wanted these 2 teenagers to survive. From what she had seen so far, they seemed to be good enough kids. However, helping was helping. She did not want to show the plasma gun, so she took out her katana instead. She let Fufi wait on the motorcycle with the bags before sprinting to the twins. The 2 struggled to deal with the 2 upgraded zombies, and the smaller twin saw that his brother was about to get attacked. He hurried to shield him with his own body. Althea saw all of this in her approach, and her interest intensified. With a wave of her hand, the upgraded zombie's head fell down with a flop, and several zombie heads followed. The 2 gaped at her in awe. Thank you." The bulkier one swallowed hard, eyes shining. "Goddess." Althea smiled and took out the remaining golf clubs. "For you," she said, her euphonious voice calming their nerves, and she swung her katana again to kill the zombies that ran over because of his yell. The admiration in the eyes of the twins overflowed. But before they attract more zombies with their loud compliments, she raised a hand to silence them. "Cover yourselves with more blood and innards from zombies. Ordinary zombies won't bother you," she said with a low voice, and the 2 flinched in response. Thank you," they whispered, holding on to their golf clubs as if they were treasures. She nodded with a warm smile, absolutely shining with a halo in the eyes of the twins. They did not even notice how much gruel of zombie blood she was covered with, or even the fact that she was pregnant. It was like their eyes activated the strongest filter. But Althea didn't know this, nor did she care. She simply waved her hand as goodbye before running back to the motorcycle. It was the smaller one who gathered his wits first, poking at his brother to get going. "Oh." The two then happily headed towards the supermarket to meet their mum, so that they could happily tell her all about this encounter.
And